this may, how do people get this way? Nobody absolutely knows, but chronic physical illness as a kid, or if you had a lot of separation anxiety as a kid, those kind of things can sometimes lead to dependent personality. Again, it's diagnosed more commonly in females, but also there tends to be, because depression and anxiety are higher in women, that draws women into psychiatric clinics, and then of course they're going to be diagnosed more often with things like this than maybe men would, because men wouldn't come to the psychiatrist anyway. It actually is one of the most common personality disorders seen in psychiatric clinics. Real quickly, I'm going to talk about, and I didn't actually, this is sort of ad-libbing a little bit, but there's also something called codependency. Okay, so we've talked about dependent personality disorder, that's just what I talked about, but some people think that there's also another sort of personality disorder called codependent personality. Other people don't agree with that and think there is no such thing, and really all these people are just the same. They're dependent personality. I think, in my experience in seeing folks, that there probably is some little difference. There is a difference between codependent people and dependent people. Codependent people tend to be it's not so much that they can't do anything themselves. It's more that they're constantly caring for someone else, or sacrificing their own needs for everyone else, putting everyone else first and them last. So in a way, it sort of sounds opposite of a narcissistic person, right? Instead of putting themselves first, they put everybody else first. These folks tend to come from homes where and tend to be women. I don't know why, but a lot of times it tends to be women. But they come from homes a lot of times where there's substance abuse growing up. So mom or dad was alcoholic, let's say, and they grow up kind of, I don't know whether it comes from having to take care of dad all the time. When if dad was drunk, let's say, come home drunk or something, and the child grows up thinking, I've got to take care of dad. I've got to kind of get in between mom and dad and keep the fighting from occurring because they're fighting because of his drinking or whatever else. This person kind of gets in this mode or this way of living that they feel like they've got to be the caretaker, the peacemaker, so to speak. And unfortunately, they end up putting everyone else first so much and themselves last that they end up getting depressed a lot of times. These folks really need to, they have to learn at some point that they can't do everything for everybody. They've got to put themselves first sometimes. I sort of think of it as a spectrum, like there's a spectrum between completely selfish and completely unselfish, right? These folks are very unselfish. They'll put everybody else first and themselves last. Well, that's just as unhealthy, really, as being very, very selfish. So you need to kind of come towards the middle a little bit more. And when it's appropriate, you care about the other person, you take care of the other person, but also when it's appropriate, you take care of yourself, too. Any comments about that? I know some of you folks probably know. There's actually a book about it, Codependent No More, that I used to have people read, especially a spouse of somebody who has alcoholism or some other chemical dependency. These are folks that need to read this stuff. Parents, that have kids that have chemical dependency, for instance, too. The parents sometimes are, kind of codependent, and it's hard for them to. Yeah.
And that does apply with mental illness also, right? Not only substance abuse, but.
It can apply to anything, absolutely. Yes. So you mean the caregiving part?
Well, I just mean growing up in a mental illness environment.
It could be, absolutely. It could be. Really, I think it's anything where you have to take care of somebody or intervene and be the peacemaker, the conflict avoiding person, But also, I think what you're getting at is what if a child is in a home where mom has lots of real bad depression, or some other, it could even be some physical illness where mom or dad has some chronic physical illness, and the child feels like he or she has to take care of them a lot growing up. That certainly could lead to it as well, I think. Yeah.
I always kind of use the example like Aunt B on the Andy Griffith Show. She kind of needed to be needed.
Yes.
And you mentioned Edith on the All in the Family.
Yeah.
She can kind of fit into that role too, but she was
Right.
always trying to, make it easy for Archie and clean up his mess.
Yes.
And
Yes.
stuff like that too. So.
Yeah. So you're thinking those characters, Aunt B and Edith, are more codependent rather than dependent, or do you think some combination, or what do you think?
I would say a combination.
Yeah.
I think there was nothing that I guess Aunt B was really having to clean up per se or
Right.
cover for, but she kind of needed to be needed.
Right, right. You know, codependency, we were talking about professions and what do people get into when they have codependent traits. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting is just working around in the medical profession. I think nursing sometimes, a lot of nurses, nurses' aides, or folks that really care a lot about their common man, you know, and these are awesome. These people are awesome. And without them, we'd be in a serious world of hurt. But some of them burn out because they constantly are caring for the other, for you know, their patients and such, and to the extent where they just burn out. They can't do it anymore, emotionally or physically, whatever way. So that's kind of sad, you know. But there are a lot of them that have just enough codependent traits, but that they enjoy doing what they do. But they're also able to set a limit and say, okay, I'm giving you this much of myself, but this is all I can give, and this is it. So yeah, that's another example of a profession maybe that draws, and it's not just nursing, I'm sure, but I did see a lot of that. A lot of folks that worked in nursing homes and things. Any other questions about dependency or codependency before we go into the last one of these personality disorders? No other questions? All right. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Right off the bat, I got to tell you, it's different than obsessive compulsive disorder. Remember, there's a P in there, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and it actually is different. It's not the same as OCD. OCD, if you remember from a couple of months back, obsessive compulsive disorder is where you get these thoughts in your head, and I'll tell you, here's a classic example of this one, of OCD, that I saw since the last talk. Has anybody seen The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio about Howard Hughes? Man, what a classic. I mean, that guy was classic, you know, and he did a great job portraying him in that movie. But he had serious OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. If you notice in that movie, for those of you that saw it, he would be sort of distracted. I mean, everybody thought he couldn't hear, and I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that, but I don't think it was that he couldn't hear. I think he was distracted by all these thoughts. If you notice in the movie, he'd constantly be looking at the like dirt and germs and worrying about contamination and stuff, you know. And I think he was probably having a lot of intrusive thoughts about things. And then he would start to have compulsions, like he would say things over and over again. Remember that? He couldn't, certain things, it would be like a broken record, and then some of his co-workers or whatever, the people that worked for him, had to haul him off and get him into another room and stuff. And then at one point he locked himself up in his theater, his home theater, in his room. And he wouldn't touch anything without using Kleenex first, and he just was just a mess. The poor guy. I feel bad for this guy. I don't know. The story sort of ends, and you don't really know what happens to the guy. So I don't know what happened to Howard Hughes, but I don't know if anybody knows, but I don't know if he ever got treatment. It's kind of sad. But that's obsessive compulsive disorder. So these are thoughts that pop into your head you absolutely can't control, and they're very difficult to control. And they're thoughts of things that really upset you, so that you touch a door handle and your hands are contaminated and you're going to die from that. So you have to wash your hands over and over compulsively to prevent yourself from dying. This is different, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. You remember the show Friends with Ross and Chandler and Monica? Monica was kind of I think, and the character anyway, had obsessive compulsive personality. So she wanted everything a certain way. She was very perfectionistic, right? Everything had to be just so. And if anybody messed with everything, you know, or any of her stuff, she'd get upset about it, you know. So these folks are preoccupied with orderliness, with perfection, and control, okay? They pay a lot of attention to rules, trivial little details of things, lists, schedules, procedures, and sometimes they do so much of that they kind of lose track of what they're doing, you know, what the ultimate goal is, you know, because they're so lost in all the details of everything. They repeat things over and over again in detail, checking for any kind of possible mistake. I mean, over and over they'll do that. They may be so intent on making every detail again that they don't get the project, whatever they're working on, never gets finished. Deadlines are missed and things like that. They kind of really get off on a lot of work. I mean, they want to work all the time, want to be busy all the time, productive. And as a matter of fact, they sort of feel that it's not okay, or that they don't have time to take any time off, to take any kind of, to relax at all, take any leisure time at all. And so because of that, friendships, relationships can suffer, and this is where this disorder kind of gets in the way of relationships. Another way that it does is that for everything has to be perfect, but perfect means they're perfect. I mean, the way they think of things as being perfect. So they have to do things their way, or it's not done right. So they're not real good at delegating things to other people. And if they do delegate something to someone else, they're going to make a huge list of detailed instructions about exactly how they want it done for it to be done right. And chances are whoever tries to do it isn't going to do it right, and then they're going to get upset, and then, again, this interferes with a lot of relationships. They're very strict and inflexible morally, so morally or ethically, I guess, they're real, again, they're by-the-book kind of folks. Very critical of their own mistakes. If they make mistakes, they get, which we all do, they get all upset about it. I thought this was kind of interesting. They don't want to get rid of old or worn-out things. They'll kind of hold on to things, because you never know when you might need that. That's sort of related to that one a little bit. I don't know about any rest of you, but the other thing that's interesting is they're very miserly or stingy with their money, very tight. And it's not because they don't have any money. As a matter of fact, they sort of live under their means. They live way below what they could live at, because they're always saving their money for some future financial crisis or catastrophe or something. They're always worried something bad's going to happen, and so they want to stash it all away, and hold on to it. They're kind of stubborn, kind of rigid, plan ahead. Everything's planned way ahead, with a lot of detail, meticulous detail about things. Have trouble prioritizing which tasks, which things should I do first, second, third. They kind of get lost in all that. Can't make those decisions very well. And then they get upset or angry when they can't control things as much as they would like. They're very logical. These are folks that are very logical. Everything's logical, has its reason, has its rationale. They're not real comfortable around folks that have a lot of emotions, that sort of wear their emotions on their sleeves. Most people that have this OCPD do not actually have OCD, the obsessive compulsive disorder. So it's a little bit confusing, because they sound almost the same, but they're really not the same. And again, it says about 1%, but in a psychiatric clinic, about 3 to 10% of folks that go through a psychiatric clinic will have this. I guess, any questions about that one? Anybody ever meet anybody like that?
Yeah, my old lady.
Yeah.
You too?
I'm sure. You too?
It's just like the mowing the grass. Anything.
Yes.
Anything.
Yeah.
She says, I asked her where you want it, how high you want it, how low you want it. She's that picky.
Yeah.
She said, put it on 5 and stay alive. I mow it, and it's still not good enough. I said, tell her she can mow.
That's right.
It's just every single. Our house, you can eat off the floor.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. It's pathetic.
Yeah. But this is how she's wired.
Yes.
So have some empathy. I would imagine there are times that she's aware of that it really bothers her. I think that she's like that. So I would think that, again, if it's interfering with her function, which, you're in a relationship with her, you guys have to decide. But if it's interfering with, especially if it were to interfere with work or something else, then it could be a disorder. And if it is, it's not a bad idea to go and see somebody, learn about it a little bit. And the interesting thing, and this is kind of getting into the treatment, for any of these personality disorders, from either last month that we talked about or today, like I said, there aren't any excellent medicines for this. You can't take a medicine and become somebody different, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I don't know. I guess we wouldn't really want to change all of ourselves. But some of the symptoms, like if you got a lot of anxiety from something, let's say the avoidant or social phobia thing, there are medicines that can help with the anxiety or with the mood swings. There are some medicines that will help, like if some of these personality disorders, I would describe the person as having a very short fuse, like a narcissistic person or an antisocial or borderline person. If you have a very short fuse, there are some medicines you can use to help with that, lengthen the fuse a little bit. Do you know what I mean by short fuse? Like just go off really fast about something, just boom, you're just like blowing up, like a bell going off. So medicines have their role and have their place, but they're not really ideal. In other words, there's no FDA-approved medicine for any one of these disorders. You can't get a medicine that's approved for obsessive compulsive personality disorder or any of these others. So psychotherapy is really what it's all about. And what does that mean? You know, what do you do in psychotherapy? First thing is getting to know what it is. So if somebody had obsessive compulsive personality disorder, maybe they never had heard of that, maybe they don't know anything about it, but going in and learning, geez, you know, I guess I do have some of that stuff. You know, being any of us can benefit from being more aware of our own issues, right? Of how other people see us, and you know, how we interact with other people, and whether it goes well or not well. You know, what causes that? You know, what's the good stuff about me? What's the stuff that isn't so good about me? And once you learn the stuff that's not so, you know, that's, I don't want to say not so good. How do I phrase it? Not as functional, maybe, the stuff that interferes a little bit more with your relationships. Once you learn that stuff, then you can sort of start to pay attention more to it. And then you'll start to figure out, oh, you know, here I did it again. You know, I did the same thing. Like, you know, I picked on the way he mowed the lawn again. Just the way, you know, I've been doing it over and over again. And he's told me before that kind of bothers him. I need to start, you know. So the first step is learning that you have the problem, or you have the issue. And then the next step is trying to identify when is it becoming an issue, and then stopping it, nipping it in the bud, so to speak. And so through psychotherapy, that's how that works, and that's how you do that. I want to caution you, it's not like, you know, none of us are going to go into psychotherapy and come out a completely different person. No more than taking a medicine, you're going to be a different person. So, you know, not that, hopefully your wife, yeah, you know, if somebody with obsessive compulsive personality disorder goes into psychotherapy, and even if they realize all these issues, you know, they're still going to be wired that way. I mean, that's just the way they're wired. You know, you're wired a certain way, you're wired a certain way, we're all wired a certain way. There's nothing wrong or bad about that. What's sometimes a problem is if it interferes with our relationship with other people, then we got to learn about that, figure out some way to change it if we can, or at least work on it, you know. And that's really what it's about. You're not going to take somebody who's very obsessive compulsive in their personality and make them into somebody who's very, doesn't care about, you know, who's just very laid back all the time, you know. You just can't, you know that. I mean, you guys know this from life experience, right? From your relationships and such. People can try really hard to change, and they'll change to some extent, and sometimes it's good enough. But other times, you know, it just doesn't work. It's just not enough. So the relationship they're in, you know, just doesn't work. But I don't know if that explains it very well, but that's, realistically, you just want to become more functional. You're not probably going to become somebody you're not, somebody different. Any questions about that? About any of this stuff? Personality disorders, treatment, any of that? Not so much. This being the last talk of the year, I came across some stuff that I wanted to just to real briefly mention, and kind of, again, instill in you guys the importance of learning about this stuff, about the brain, and about how your brain works and how it doesn't work. There was and also sort of the reason that I'm doing these talks, there was a survey by the American Psychiatric Association of about 1,000 American adults in March. And the idea was they're trying to figure out how much the people in the general American public know about their brains and about brain illnesses and psychiatric illnesses. And what they found was exactly what I've sort of found through experience, you know, through treating folks and interacting with folks just in day-to-day life, is that folks really don't know a whole lot about it. And this is really the idea behind me doing this. I think we really need to learn more about our brains and how these things work, and what causes us all to act and feel the way we do. And unfortunately, folks in this survey anyway, and I think it's pretty representative of people in America, or in, I would guess, everywhere around the world, they don't really understand the warning signs, the causes of these things. They don't really understand when something is even an issue. You know, they may say somebody kind of acts crazy or whatever, but that's about the extent of it. They don't really get much further than that. And I'm kind of hoping that people will be able to start to say, well, you know, they seem like they might have a little obsessive compulsive personality or something, or maybe they're depressed. You know, that's why they're irritable all the time, or whatever. Instead of somebody, or somebody is narcissistic and goes off on you, and you're able to say, geez, that guy's awful narcissistic. And so you're able to put it back off on him and realize it's not me. I didn't do anything. It was him. He's got the issue. And then maybe that avoids a huge fight, you know, or somebody getting hurt, you know, because you're able to sort of shrug it off and say, yeah, geez, that guy's got issues. I remember Doc talking about that. You know, that's much better than, you know, getting into space and getting in a huge fight. So these are the ideas. This is the idea that I have behind doing this. But a couple things, I guess. Are these things treatable? Absolutely, they're treatable. For instance, depression, we got about a 70 to 80% chance of successfully treating depression. when you look at heart disease or other chronic illnesses, but heart disease in particular, it's about 45 to 50% chance of, 45 to 50% of the time we can treat that with a favorable outcome. So it's, depression is very treatable, and even more so maybe than heart disease, which is something we all sort of think of as very treatable. The other thing that I think the American public didn't realize is just how common these things are. Most folks were saying, 10% or less of people have these in America have one or more of these brain illnesses. Well, really, the true figure is about 20% of folks. That's a lot of folks. That's a lot of people. 1/5 of the population of America has some type of brain illness. I'm calling them brain illnesses, but I mean that would include things like personality disorders, which I don't know if you call it an illness or what, but it certainly interferes with function. And the other thing that I thought was still sort of sad is that 33% of American adults still think that these things are like an emotional weakness or some character fault of the person. And 29% thought that maybe old age, when somebody in an older age has these things, well, it's just old age, just because grandma's getting old, And that's not, we got to do better than that. We got to all realize that these things are true illnesses. It's not a weakness. It's not something somebody's doing wrong or not living right. Another one is, that you're not a good enough Christian or whatever religion you are. You're not following it close enough. So I'm just hoping that through these talks, that this stuff gets out and folks start to realize what these are and, that it's not, that we're all, if you have a brain, basically, you can have some of these things. And so we need to have a little more compassion and understanding for other folks, common man, I guess. So that's pretty much it. I think next year, starting in September, we'll start again. We've covered a lot of the psychiatric stuff already. The only one I think that I haven't covered, unless other folks have ideas, is psychosis, schizophrenia, and delusional disorder, and some of the others. Those are kind of interesting. Those would be neat to talk about. And then after that, it's sort of open. I think I sort of thought about doing some neurologic things. I think I mentioned Parkinson's disease, maybe doing something on that. And I'd like to bring in some more guest speakers next year too, and get somebody else up here talking besides myself. But hopefully you guys will be able to come back next year, and hope all you guys have a good summer. So thanks for coming tonight.